On my birthday, my husband and children handed me divorce papers and eviction notices. The house, the business, the company, everything gone. My daughter sneered, calling me pathetic as they all laughed. I smiled, signed without trembling, and quietly left. Within a week, my phone lit up with 42 desperate calls. Karma had arrived faster than expected. She actually thinks we're throwing her a party tomorrow. Emma's laugh drifted through the heating vent from Daniel's home office directly below our bedroom. I pressed my ear closer to the metal grate. Dad, are you sure the lawyer said the eviction notice is legal? Ethan's voice now. We've covered everything, Daniel responded. The business transfer, the house deed, the divorce papers. By tomorrow night, your mother won't own anything except that ancient Toyota she refuses to sell. I remained frozen on our bedroom floor, my knees grinding into the carpet as my family casually discussed my erasure. Before we continue, I want to thank you for being here. If you believe family betrayal deserves consequences, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps others find these important stories. Now, let's see what I discovered. My hand found the edge of our bed frame, gripping it until my knuckles went white. Through the vent, I heard chairs scraping against Daniel's office floor, papers rustling. Ethan's voice carried up again, clinical and detached, the way he probably sounded in court. The transfer documents are ironclad. I've structured it so she can't claim coercion. As long as she signs willingly, thinking it's something else, we're protected. And Rachel's ready to move in this weekend? Emma asked. There was an eagerness in her voice that made my stomach turn. Rachel Carter, the name had been floating around our social circle for months. A recent widow who'd inherited her husband's lumber supply business. Rachel understands the timeline, Daniel said, his voice holding a warmth I hadn't heard directed at me in over a year. She's already moved some of her things into the storage unit downtown. Once Sarah is out, we can start fresh. I crawled backward from the vent, my movements silent on the thick carpet I'd chosen specifically for its sound-dampening qualities. Ironic that my decorating choice now allowed me to eavesdrop on my own demise. Standing on shaking legs, I moved to our bedroom window and looked out at the backyard where we'd raised our children. The swing set had been gone for years, replaced by Daniel's workshop, but I could still see the ghost of it in the worn patch of grass that never quite recovered. The conversation below continued, but I'd heard enough. My family had been planning this for months while I kept their lives running smoothly. This morning alone, I'd reviewed 5 contracts for the construction company, confirmed next week's material deliveries, and balanced the accounts that Ethan was supposedly managing. I walked to our closet and pulled down the small suitcase from the top shelf, the one I used for overnight business trips. My hands moved automatically, folding clothes, selecting items that predated my marriage, the pearl necklace my mother had given me for my high school graduation, the watch I'd bought myself with my first paycheck, the photo album from college before Daniel existed in my world. Downstairs, I heard the office door open. Footsteps dispersed through the house. Daniel's heavy tread moved toward the kitchen. Ethan's lighter steps headed to the front door, probably leaving for his apartment in downtown Boise, the one I'd co-signed for when his credit wasn't sufficient. Emma's heels clicked toward the garage where her Audi sat, the car we'd given her for completing her master's degree. I tucked the suitcase back into the closet and descended the stairs with practiced normalcy. Daniel stood at the kitchen counter, pouring coffee into his favorite mug, the one with the hairline crack that Ethan had given him years ago. He looked up when I entered, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something, guilt, anticipation. It passed too quickly to identify. Morning plans? I asked, pulling my own mug from the cabinet. Just some paperwork in the office, he said, not meeting my eyes. Tomorrow's a big day. Your birthday. The words sat between us like a loaded gun on the table. 59 years old, I said, adding cream to my coffee, watching it swirl and disappear into the darkness. I suppose that's worth celebrating. We have something special planned. His smile didn't reach his eyes. It hadn't in months. When had I stopped noticing? The morning stretched ahead with its usual routine, but everything felt different now. I drove to our construction company's warehouse in Meridian, Idaho, where Miguel greeted me with his usual worried expression about inventory discrepancies. 3 pallets of premium maple flooring had vanished from our system. 2 shipments of granite had been redirected without authorization. The security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned on the exact nights these changes occurred. "Mrs. Carter," Miguel said, lowering his voice, "something's not right here. These aren't accidents or software glitches." I patted his shoulder. This loyal man who'd worked for us since the beginning. "I know, Miguel. Don't worry about it. Just document everything carefully." He nodded, confusion clear on his face. He didn't understand why I wasn't more upset. How could I explain that stolen flooring was the least of my concerns when my entire life was being systematically dismantled by the people I trusted most? The rest of the day passed in a surreal haze. I attended meetings, signed purchase orders, and solved problems as if everything was normal. But underneath, my mind was racing, planning, preparing. Every interaction with Ethan felt like theater. He stopped by the office to discuss the software issues with inventory, his face a mask of professional concern, while knowing he'd orchestrated the entire situation. Emma called to confirm family dinner on Sunday, her voice bright and false. "We'll celebrate your birthday properly then, Mom. Just family, like you prefer." I agreed, matching her tone, both of us performing our roles in this elaborate deception. That evening, I stood in the kitchen preparing dinner while Daniel worked in his office below. Through the vent, I could hear him on the phone, probably with Rachel, his voice low and intimate. Tomorrow, they planned to serve me with papers at what I was supposed to believe was my birthday celebration. Tomorrow, they would watch me sign away everything I'd spent 31 years building. But tonight, I stood in my kitchen cooking Daniel's favorite meal one last time, my movements calm and precise. They thought I was oblivious, content in my routine, blind to their machinations. Let them think that. Tomorrow would come soon enough, and with it, surprises they never anticipated. My phone sat on the counter with 3 numbers already programmed, waiting for tomorrow's aftermath. Linda Harper, forensic accountant; Robert Ellison, corporate attorney; Detective Maria Torres, who still had questions about my business partner's death 8 years ago. I smiled as I plated the dinner, a genuine smile for the first time all day. They thought tomorrow was their carefully orchestrated finale. They had no idea it was actually just the beginning. Morning arrived with Daniel standing at my bedside, holding a steaming cup of coffee and wearing an expression I hadn't seen since Ethan's high school graduation. His hands trembled slightly as he set the mug on my nightstand, the liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Wear your navy dress today, the one from our anniversary dinner last year." His voice carried an odd formality, as if reading from a script he'd memorized poorly. "We have something special planned for you downstairs." The navy dress hung in our closet, tag still attached. I'd bought it for our anniversary, but we'd never made it to dinner. Daniel had claimed a construction emergency that night. though I'd later seen the receipt from a downtown Boise restaurant in his jacket pocket. Table for two. I slipped into the dress now, its silk fabric cool against my skin, and noticed how Daniel watched me from the doorway, his foot tapping against the hardwood floor in a nervous rhythm I recognized from 31 years of marriage. Walking down our stairs felt different this morning. The usual family photos along the wall seemed to watch my descent with knowing eyes. At the bottom, the living room had been rearranged, furniture pushed against the walls, creating an open space in the center, where our walnut coffee table sat like an altar. The morning light streaming through the windows illuminated a thick manila folder placed precisely in the center. Ethan stood by the front door, his stance wide and blocking, dressed in his courtroom suit despite it being Saturday. His phone was out, held at an angle that suggested recording. Emma positioned herself near the hallway to the garage, her own phone raised, a small smile playing at her lips. They formed a triangle with Daniel at the apex, and I stood in the center, surrounded. "Please sit down, Sarah." Daniel gestured to the chair they'd positioned facing the table. Not my usual spot where I'd sat for thousands of morning coffees, but a kitchen chair brought in specifically for this moment. The wood felt cold through the silk dress. Ethan cleared his throat and stepped forward, his lawyer voice replacing any trace of the son who used to call me for advice during law school. "Mom, we need to discuss some changes to the family structure and business arrangements. What we're presenting today is the result of careful consideration and legal consultation." The folder opened under Daniel's fingers, revealing documents marked with yellow tabs indicating signature lines. So many tabs, a lifetime of tabs. Ethan continued speaking, his words flowing with practiced precision while I watched Daniel's hands shake as he spread the papers across the table's surface. "The first document is a dissolution of marriage filing. The terms are generous considering the circumstances," Ethan said, his eyes never meeting mine, focused instead on a point just above my head. "You'll receive your personal belongings and the Toyota. The second set transfers your interest in the construction business to Dad, recognizing his role as primary operator. The third relinquishes claim to this property, acknowledging that the mortgage and improvements were funded primarily through Dad's efforts." Each word landed with calculated impact, but it was Daniel who delivered the personal blow. "We've grown apart, Sarah. You know we have. This is best for everyone, a chance for new chapters." His memorized speech faltered as he gestured vaguely at the papers. "Rachel Carter has been helping us navigate this transition. She understands business, understands what we need moving forward." Emma finally spoke, her young voice carrying a cruelty that must have been rehearsed to achieve such perfect delivery. "We've already moved your things to the garage, Mom. The stuff that's actually yours anyway. Most of it was Dad's money that bought everything else." She lowered her phone slightly to look directly at me. "It's all sorted, labeled, ready for you to take." The silence that followed felt alive, breathing in the space between us. Through the front window, I caught movement. Mrs. Thompson from across the street stood in her garden, pretending to water plants that didn't need watering. Mr. Garcia next door had chosen this moment to check his mailbox for the third time this morning. They knew. The whole neighborhood had been informed, warned, or invited to witness my humiliation. "You're pathetic, Mom." Emma's words cut through the silence with surgical precision. "Did you really think we needed you anymore? Dad built this business. Ethan has the legal expertise. I have my own life, my own career. What exactly do you contribute except going through the motions every day like some kind of robot? Ethan's chuckle came quick and sharp, a sound I'd never heard from him before. Daniel's laugh followed, nervous and high, the laugh of a man who'd crossed a line and couldn't find his way back. The sound echoed off the walls of the home I'd spent 3 decades creating, maintaining, and filling with what I'd thought was love. Movement from the kitchen caught my attention. Lucas Hayes stepped into view, Ethan's law school friend, who'd attended dozens of dinners at this very table. He held his briefcase like a shield, his expression professionally neutral. "I'm here as a witness," he announced unnecessarily, "to verify that all signatures are given freely and without coercion." The pen appeared in Daniel's hand, expensive and heavy, the Mont Blanc I'd given him when he'd landed our first major contract. He extended it toward me with the same hand that had held mine through labor pains, through my mother's funeral, through celebrations and failures and ordinary Tuesday mornings that now felt like treasures I'd never properly valued. I took the pen. Its weight felt significant, final. The room held its breath as I pulled the first document toward me. Ethan shifted his position slightly, ensuring his phone captured everything. Emma zoomed in with hers. Daniel's breathing grew audible in the silence. My signature flowed across the first yellow tab with practiced ease, then the second, third, each name written with the careful penmanship my mother had insisted I perfect. Back when signatures meant promises, and promises meant something. I signed away the house at 456 Pine Lane, Meridian, Idaho, where my children had taken their first steps. I signed away the business I'd helped build from a single truck and a dream. I signed away 31 years of marriage with the same steady hand that had once signed our wedding certificate. The final signature complete, I set down the pen with a soft click against the walnut surface. Looking up, I met each of their eyes in turn. Ethan's held triumph mixed with something else, uncertainty. Emma's phone lowered slightly as she processed my calm. Daniel stepped backward, as if I might explode, might rage, might become the scene they'd apparently prepared for. Then I smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached my eyes and transformed my face into something they hadn't seen in years. Peace. It unnerved them more than any scream could have. "Thank you," I said softly, rising from the chair with deliberate grace. "This makes everything so much simpler." My steady composure lasted exactly until I closed the Toyota's door behind me. The old car's engine turned over on the third try, just as it had for the past 15 years, and I drove away from my former life with nothing but 2 suitcases, and a silence so complete it felt like drowning. The extended stay hotel sat 12 miles from the house, in Nampa, Idaho, far enough that no one from our social circle would accidentally spot my car in the parking lot. The desk clerk barely glanced up as I counted out cash for a week's stay. Room 237 smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams, but it had a door that locked and a bed that wasn't shared with a man who'd been planning my disposal for 6 months. I dropped the suitcases by the door and pulled out my phone, switching it to airplane mode before removing the SIM card entirely. They'd expect me to call someone, anyone, to rage and cry and beg for explanations. Instead, I would disappear into the silence they'd created. But first, I needed intelligence. During the drive, I'd mentally photographed every document I'd signed. Now, I spread my phone across the bed, zooming in on the images I'd managed to capture while pretending to read. Ethan's legal language was precise but arrogant. He'd buried clauses in subsections, assuming I'd sign without reading, just as I apparently did everything else without thinking. One clause particularly stood out. a non-compete agreement preventing me from working in construction within a 500-mile radius, unenforceable according to Idaho state law, but they didn't know I knew that. My notebook filled quickly with columns of information, assets they knew about versus ones they didn't. The separate business account I'd opened 3 years ago when I'd started noticing discrepancies, now holding $40,000 in legitimate consulting fees from side projects Daniel had deemed too small to bother with. The storage unit across town in Caldwell, Idaho, where I kept my mother's antiques, still in my maiden name. The network of suppliers who dealt with me directly, bypassing the official company channels. At exactly midnight, I walked to the hotel's business center and used their phone to make the first call. Linda Harper answered on the second ring, her voice alert despite the hour. We'd been roommates at Boise State University, both studying business when women were still oddities in those classrooms. She'd become a forensic accountant, specializing in divorce cases, finding hidden assets with the dedication of a bloodhound. "Sarah, this number isn't yours." Her voice sharpened with concern. "I need your expertise, Linda. Confidentially. Can we meet tomorrow? Where and when?" No questions about why I was calling from an unknown number at midnight. No expressions of surprise. Linda had handled enough ugly divorces to recognize the sound of a woman in crisis. The second call required more delicate handling. Robert Ellison had built his law practice on corporate litigation. 4 years ago, I'd helped his daughter Emily escape an abusive marriage by hiding her in our guest house for 3 weeks, while Robert arranged protection orders. He tried to pay me, tried to express gratitude in ways that mattered to men like him, but I'd simply told him that someday I might need a favor. "Robert, it's Sarah Carter. I'm calling in that favor." His pause lasted 3 seconds. "I'll clear my morning schedule, my private office entrance, 7 sharp." The third call made my hands shake slightly. Detective Maria Torres had investigated my business partner, Thomas Carter's, death 8 years ago, heart attack at 51. The coroner had ruled, though Thomas had just passed a comprehensive physical the month before. His widow, Rachel, had inherited his shares in our largest competitor, then sold them 6 months later for triple their value when the company mysteriously received 3 government contracts Thomas had been pursuing. "Detective Torres, this is Sarah Carter. I have information about Thomas Carter that might interest you." "That case has been cold for 8 years, Mrs. Carter." "It won't be cold after you hear what I've learned about Rachel Carter's previous husband, the one who died 5 years before Thomas." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Then, "Can you come to the precinct tomorrow afternoon? Bring everything you have." By dawn, my phone had accumulated 17 missed calls despite being powered off. The hotel's business center computer showed 53 emails in the new account I'd created. Several were from Miguel, my warehouse manager, each one more urgent than the last. I called him from the hotel phone, knowing he'd be at the warehouse by 5:30, just as he had been every morning for 12 years. "Mrs. Carter, thank God. Everything's going crazy here. Mr. Carter showed up at 4 this morning with that Carter woman, had me change all the computer passwords, said you were taking a medical leave." His voice dropped. "She was measuring the offices, talking about renovations." "Miguel, I need you to do exactly what they tell you, but I also need you to document everything, every change, every visitor, every unusual order or cancellation. Can you do that without being obvious?" "You gave me a chance when nobody else would, Mrs. Carter. I don't forget that." The next 2 hours brought a flood of intelligence. 3 major clients had called Miguel directly, confused about emails from Ethan announcing restructuring and price increases. 2 suppliers reported that payment terms had been unilaterally changed from 30 days to 90. The Wilson project foreman mentioned that inferior materials had been delivered that morning, despite the specs clearly stating premium grade. But the most valuable information came from an unexpected source. Karen Lopez, who ran the coffee shop where Daniel met clients, called the hotel's main line asking for me specifically. Someone had told her I might be staying there. "Honey, I don't know what's happening in your world, but that husband of yours has been meeting with Rachel Carter every Tuesday and Thursday morning for the past 18 months. Always the corner booth, always thought they were being discreet." She paused. "My cousin Maria works at the courthouse. Rachel's been there 3 times in the past month filing paperwork. And here's the interesting part. She filed the exact same types of documents before her second husband died. Maria remembers because it seemed strange at the time, getting everything in order months before he had his sudden heart attack. The pieces formed a pattern so clear I wondered how I'd missed it. Daniel hadn't fallen for a younger woman or gotten bored with our marriage. He'd been selected, groomed, and was now being positioned for something far worse than divorce. Rachel Carter didn't just steal businesses. She eliminated their owners after securing control. I made one final call that morning, this time to Laura Martinez, who ran the private investigation firm Robert had recommended for business matters. Her rate was expensive but worthwhile, especially when I mentioned Rachel Carter's name. "That woman's got a reputation," Laura said carefully. "I'll need a retainer, but I can have a preliminary background by tomorrow. Fair warning, though, if half of what I've heard is true, you're not dealing with a simple divorce situation. You're dealing with someone who plays for keeps, permanently." The hotel room had transformed from a refuge into a command center. Documents spread across the bed, laptop open to business accounts they didn't know existed, phone numbers for allies who would help me navigate the disaster my family had unleashed. They thought they'd won, thought I'd crumble into nothing while they celebrated their freedom. They had no idea what they'd actually done. They'd freed me, too. Linda Harper arrived at the hotel room at 7 the next morning, carrying 2 laptops and a box of files that made the desk groan when she set them down. Her expression shifted from professional concern to genuine alarm when she saw the documents I'd photographed spread across the bed, each one marked with sticky notes detailing the hidden clauses and implications. 3 years, she said after 90 minutes of analysis, her fingers flying across calculator keys. "They've been bleeding the company for 3 years, Sarah. The patterns are clear once you know what to look for." She pulled up spreadsheets on her laptop, the numbers forming a story of systematic theft, funds diverted through fake vendor payments, legitimate expenses inflated by 30%, with the excess routed to accounts in the Bahamas, construction materials purchased but never delivered, their costs written off as losses. The total made my stomach turn. 1.2 million methodically stolen while I'd been focused on daily operations. Ethan's digital signature appears on every fraudulent document, Linda continued, highlighting specific transactions. He used his law firm's credibility to authorize transfers that would never pass a real audit. And here, look at this. She pointed to a series of equipment sales from 6 months ago. Your daughter sold 3 excavators and a crane through a third party. The equipment went for half its market value, and the buyer was a shell company that traced back to an art gallery, her gallery. The gallery Emma had opened last year, the one we'd celebrated with champagne and proud parent photos. Every opening, every exhibition, funded by stolen equipment from the company her grandfather had started with his bare hands and a single truck. Linda's most damning discovery came from cross-referencing dates. Rachel Carter's name appears on signature cards for your business accounts 2 weeks before your birthday, before the divorce papers were filed. They were so confident you'd sign that they'd already started the transfer process. My phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. Need to talk in person. Urgent. I met him at a diner 5 miles from the warehouse, choosing a booth where I could watch the door. Miguel arrived looking haggard, sliding into the seat across from me with movements that suggested he'd been looking over his shoulder. Mrs. Carter, I stayed late last night pretending to do inventory. Around 9, your husband showed up with that Carter woman. They didn't know I was in the upper storage area. He pulled out his phone, swiping to a voice recording app. I recorded this. The audio was muffled but clear enough. Daniel's voice. Once the divorce is finalized, we can start liquidating assets more aggressively. Then Rachel, her tone cold and businesslike. The timeline is critical. We need her completely removed from any decision-making position. If she tries to interfere, we'll handle it. I've handled obstacles before. There's more, Miguel whispered. I checked the security system this morning. Someone deleted footage from 3 specific nights over the past month, but they didn't know about the backup drive I installed in the ceiling. I have everything. The footage he'd saved on a thumb drive showed Daniel and Rachel photographing inventory lists, client contracts, and supplier agreements. In one frame, Rachel was on her phone while pointing at our client database on the computer screen. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m., 3 weeks before my birthday. They've been planning to gut the company and sell it piece by piece, Miguel said. I heard her mention buyers from Denver who'll take the contracts, but not the employees. Everyone would be terminated. Detective Torres's call came as I was driving back to the hotel. Can you meet me at the precinct now? What I found, we need to discuss it immediately. Her office hadn't changed in 8 years, still cluttered with case files and coffee cups that looked like science experiments. But her expression was different, sharper, more focused than when she'd investigated Thomas's death. Rachel Carter's first husband died of a heart attack at 47, her second, Thomas, at 51. Both were cremated within 48 hours, which is unusual but not illegal. But here's what we missed. She spread photos across her desk. Both men increased their life insurance policies 6 months before their deaths. Both named Rachel as beneficiary, and both had the same symptoms in their final weeks: fatigue, shortness of breath, chest pain, classic signs of digitalis poisoning, which mimics heart attack symptoms. She pulled up another document on her computer. Your husband increased his life insurance policy last month, $2 million. Rachel Carter is listed as secondary beneficiary after you, but once the divorce is finalized, she becomes primary. I'm finished, I said. My tech specialist recovered deleted text messages from a phone Rachel thought she'd destroyed. She and your husband discussed permanent solutions and timeline adjustments regarding someone they refer to as the obstacle. Given the context, we believe that's you. The room felt smaller suddenly, the implications crushing. This wasn't just about money or business. Rachel had graduated from financial murder to the actual kind, and Daniel was either complicit or next on her list. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was David Wilson, whose housing development represented 40% of our company's current contracts. Sarah, I'm calling you directly because something's not right. Ethan missed our meeting yesterday, then sent inferior materials to my site that weren't even close to spec. My foreman had to refuse delivery. The substandard lumber could have caused a catastrophic failure. His voice hardened. I also heard you're no longer with the company. Is that true? It's complicated, David. Then uncomplicate it. I hired your company because of your reputation for quality. If you're starting something new, I want in. The contract can be transferred if the terms are met. 2 more clients called within the hour with similar concerns. Ethan's incompetence was destroying relationships I'd spent 20 years building. Emma's material substitutions had caused a minor collapse at a job site, thankfully with no injuries, but the liability issues were mounting. By evening, I had 3 file boxes of evidence: financial fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, corporate sabotage, and enough documentation to destroy the lives of everyone who'd laughed at my humiliation just 48 hours ago. Linda had traced the offshore accounts. Torres had built a case that would trigger a federal investigation. Miguel had saved footage that would prove premeditation. Laura Martinez's preliminary report on Rachel included 2 other suspicious deaths in different states. The woman who'd walked out of her house with nothing but memories had transformed into something else entirely. They'd thought they were disposing of a used-up wife and mother. Instead, they'd created their own worst nightmare: a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The file boxes sat in my hotel room like loaded weapons waiting to be fired, but I forced myself to wait. Timing would determine whether my evidence destroyed them or merely wounded them enough to retaliate. Each morning brought new reports from Miguel that confirmed what I already knew. Without me, the company was eating itself alive. The Wilson crane broke down again today, Miguel informed me during our Tuesday morning call. Ethan refused to authorize the repair costs, said we'd just use the backup. He doesn't know we sold the backup crane 6 months ago. Emma handled that transaction herself. The operator had to walk off the Taylor site. Through the hotel window, I watched rain streak the glass, while Miguel detailed the cascade of failures. The automated billing system had crashed because Ethan had forgotten to renew the software license. 3 subcontractors had walked off sites after payments were delayed past 90 days. The liability insurance was set to lapse in a week because Emma had been using the premium payments to cover her gallery's rent. I documented everything in a leather journal, each failure meticulously recorded with dates, times, and consequences. The methodical note-taking gave me something to focus on besides the hole in my chest where my family used to live. 31 years of marriage reduced to evidence items. 2 children I'd raised became co-conspirators in my elimination. The knock on my door at 3 that afternoon was soft but persistent. Through the peephole, I saw Patricia Evans, my mentor from 20 years ago when I'd first entered the construction industry. She stood in the hallway, wearing a rain-soaked coat and an expression of determined concern. "Sarah, open the door. I know you're in there, and we need to talk." Patricia entered my room without judgment, taking in the evidence boxes and wall of documents with the practiced eye of someone who'd built an empire from worse circumstances. She'd started Evans Construction with a single truck after her own divorce, turning it into the largest firm in 3 states. "Word travels fast in our industry," she said, settling into the uncomfortable hotel chair like it was a throne. "Ethan Carter called me yesterday, trying to poach my contracts. The boy actually thought throwing around his father's name would mean something. I told him, I only work with professionals who know the difference between rebar and regret." Despite everything, I almost smiled at that. "I'm here with an offer, Sarah. Not charity, business. I need someone who understands quality control, client relationships, and project management. Someone who can take over our commercial division while I focus on government contracts. She pulled a folder from her briefcase. Full partnership track, corner office in the Centennial Building. And here's the interesting part. It overlooks your old headquarters. You can watch them fail while you rebuild. The salary she quoted was double what I'd ever drawn from my own company. The benefits included things I'd never allowed myself: car allowance, expense account, profit sharing that actually meant something. But it was the project list that made my breath catch. Every client who'd called me about Ethan's incompetence was already inquiring about moving their contracts to Evans Construction. When would you need an answer? Take your time. A week, maybe 2. Though I should mention the Wilson project is specifically requesting your involvement. Apparently, there was an incident with substandard materials that nearly caused a structural collapse. After Patricia left, I needed groceries and basic supplies. The hotel's mini-mart prices were astronomical, and I'd been living on vending machine coffee for too long. The supermarket on Fairview Avenue was far enough from our usual haunts that I felt safe from unexpected encounters. I was comparing pasta prices when a hand grabbed my upper arm. Daniel stood there, his face haggard, his usually perfect hair unkempt. The confident man who'd orchestrated my removal looked desperate, smaller somehow. "Sarah, we need to talk. You don't understand what's happening. Rachel, she's not what I thought." Movement outside caught my eye. Rachel Carter sat in her Mercedes, engine running, watching us through the store's glass front. The man in her passenger seat was unfamiliar, thick-necked and alert, his eyes tracking our interaction with professional interest. "Let go of my arm, Daniel." My voice carried enough volume that nearby shoppers turned to look. "Please, just 5 minutes. You're in danger. We're both in danger. She's done this before." I pulled free and walked quickly toward the coffee shop next door, pulling out my phone as I moved. The coffee shop was crowded, full of witnesses, and had a rear exit through the kitchen if needed. Detective Torres answered immediately. "Rachel Carter is at Fairview Market with an unknown male, possibly armed. Daniel just approached me. Seems panicked." "Stay in public spaces. I'm sending a unit now." Through the coffee shop window, I watched Daniel exit the store and approach Rachel's car. She rolled down the window, and even from a distance, I could see her expression shift from charming to vicious. Daniel stepped back, his hands raised defensively. The unknown man got out of the car, moving toward Daniel with deliberate intimidation. Then police sirens wailed in the distance, and both Rachel and her companion quickly returned to the Mercedes and drove away. Torres called back an hour later. "We missed them, but we ran the plates on her car. She was at the university library this morning, accessing medical journals, specifically articles about plant-based toxins that mimic cardiac symptoms. She's escalating." That night, I sat surrounded by 12 manila envelopes, each one labeled with a different destination. The IRS would receive documentation of tax fraud. The Idaho State Attorney General would get evidence of embezzlement. The construction board would learn about safety violations and substandard materials. Rachel Carter's insurance companies would discover interesting patterns in her beneficiary history. But the masterpiece was the package for Channel 6's investigative reporter, Lisa Wong, who'd been looking for a story about corporate corruption. I included enough evidence to launch an investigation, but held back the most damaging revelations. Those would come later, timed perfectly with Daniel's attempt to file mental incompetency claims against me. Each package contained different pieces of the puzzle, ensuring multiple investigations would launch simultaneously. No single agency would have the complete picture, but together they would create an inescapable net. Digital copies were uploaded to cloud storage accounts under different names. Physical copies were secured in a safety deposit box at a bank in Eagle, Idaho, where nobody knew me. The 12th envelope was different. It contained a single photograph, Rachel and Daniel at the warehouse at 2:47 a.m., and a note, "I know everything. Your move." That envelope would be hand-delivered to Rachel Carter tomorrow afternoon, right after the others were mailed. Let her wonder how much I knew. Let her panic about which agencies were already investigating. Let her make the kind of mistakes that desperate people always make when they realize their perfect plans are crumbling. The rain had stopped, leaving the parking lot gleaming under streetlights. Somewhere across town, my family was probably sleeping peacefully in beds I'd chosen, in rooms I'd decorated, confident in their victory. Dawn on day 12 arrived with me standing at a postal service counter in Nampa, watching the clerk process 11 certified mail packages. Each envelope disappeared into the system with a tracking number that I carefully recorded. The 12th package, Rachel's personal warning, would be delivered by courier at exactly 2 p.m., giving the official investigations a 6-hour head start. By the time I arrived at Patricia Evans's office for my first unofficial day of work, the machinery of justice had already begun grinding forward. Patricia had given me a temporary workspace on the executive floor, a glass-walled office that overlooked Boise's construction district. From my window, I could see the building that housed Carter Construction, the company I had helped build from nothing. At 9:47 a.m., 3 unmarked government vehicles pulled into the parking lot of my former headquarters. Federal agents emerged with boxes and warrant folders, their movements efficient and practiced. Through Patricia's high-powered telescope, which she kept for market research, I watched employees gathering at windows, their confusion visible even from this distance. My phone, silent for nearly 2 weeks, began its symphony at 10:15 a.m. The first call came from Daniel. I let it go to voicemail, then listened. "Sarah, something's happening. The IRS just froze all our accounts. They're saying something about fraudulent tax filings. This has to be a mistake. Call me immediately." 5 minutes later, another voicemail. "The state attorney general's office is here with a warrant. They're seizing computers. Sarah, whatever you think happened, this isn't the way. Please." Ethan's first message arrived at 10:32 a.m. "Mother, I don't know what you've done, but you're destroying everything grandfather built. We can resolve this privately. As your attorney, as your son, I'm advising you to contact me immediately." By noon, the voicemails had evolved. Daniel's voice had progressed from confusion to anger to something approaching panic. "They found the offshore accounts. How did you know about the offshore accounts? Rachel says you must have been spying on us illegally. We'll fight this, Sarah. You won't win." Ethan's legal threats had dissolved into desperate negotiations. "The construction board is threatening to revoke our license. 3 projects just canceled their contracts. Mom, please, let's talk about this rationally. We can work something out." But it was Emma's message that carried the most striking transformation. Her voice, usually so confident and dismissive, cracked with genuine fear. "Mom, my gallery's been seized. They say it was bought with embezzled funds. I don't understand what's happening. I don't have anywhere to go. The apartment was in the company's name. My cards don't work. Mom, I don't know how to. I've never had to. Please call me." 42 calls in total by 3 p.m. I documented each one, saving the voicemails to multiple devices. Evidence of their panic would be useful if they tried to claim ignorance later. The courier confirmed Rachel's package delivery at 2:03 p.m. By 2:47 p.m., Laura Martinez's investigator sent me photos that exceeded my wildest expectations. Rachel stood on her penthouse balcony, hurling what appeared to be Daniel's clothes into the afternoon air. Expensive suits floated down like surrender flags, while she screamed loud enough for neighboring buildings to hear. She found the photos in the package, Laura explained over the phone. Pictures of Daniel with 2 different women at hotel bars over the past year. He's been playing her while she was playing him. She's destroying everything he left at her place. The investigator's video footage showed Daniel arriving at the building, looking up at the clothing rain, then backing away as Rachel appeared to throw a laptop that exploded on the sidewalk near his feet. The security guard blocked his entry, while Rachel could be heard shrieking about being made a fool. "There's more," Laura continued. She came down to the lobby with scissors, threatening to cut up his car seats. Building security had to restrain her. Daniel fled to a motel off Highway 55, the same one where I was staying, 3 doors down from my room. The irony was almost poetic. The man who had orchestrated my exile was now living in the same cheap motel, probably eating from the same vending machines, definitely experiencing the same crushing realization that everything he thought he controlled had slipped away. Patricia and I spent the afternoon visiting clients who had expressed concerns about Carter Construction's stability. The Wilson meeting was particularly satisfying. David Wilson himself greeted us in his office, where architectural plans for his development covered every surface. "Sarah, I'm glad you're here. I received a call from Ethan Carter this morning, threatening legal action if I break our contract." 20 minutes later, the news broke about federal investigations into the company. "I want Evans Construction to take over immediately, with you personally overseeing the project." We visited 6 clients that day. Every one of them signed transfer agreements, moving their contracts to Evans Construction. The combined value exceeded $8 million, more than Carter Construction's entire annual revenue from the previous year. Miguel called as we returned to the office. "Mrs. Carter, it's chaos here. 17 workers have already quit. The rest are updating resumes. Ethan tried to run a safety meeting but didn't know the basic protocols. Someone called OSHA about the violations. They're coming Monday." "Miguel, Evans Construction needs an experienced warehouse manager. Same crew, better pay, actual safety standards. Interested?" His relief was audible. "When do I start?" By evening, Patricia and I had hired 12 of Carter Construction's best employees, secured 4 major contracts, and established a transition timeline that would have the Wilson project back on schedule within a week. We celebrated with coffee in her office, watching the last government vehicle leave the Carter Construction parking lot. "You know what the beautiful part is?" Patricia said, studying the building through her telescope. "You didn't destroy them. You just removed yourself from the equation and let them reveal who they really were. The fraud, the theft, the incompetence, it was always there. You were just the foundation holding it all together." My phone buzzed with text number 43 from Daniel. "Rachel knows about the other women. She's threatening to go to the police about something. I don't know what you've started, but it's destroying everything." I deleted the message without responding. Tomorrow, the news would break publicly. Lisa Wong's investigative report would air during the evening news. The construction community would learn about the fraud, the safety violations, and the federal investigations. By week's end, Carter Construction would exist only as a cautionary tale about greed and betrayal. But tonight, I sat in my temporary office, looking out at the city I had helped build, one quality structure at a time. Tomorrow, I would sign my employment contract with Evans Construction. Tomorrow, I would begin rebuilding my professional life on my own terms. The phone rang once more. Call number 44. This time, I recognized the number as the motel's front desk. Daniel was probably trying to reach me through their phone since I wouldn't answer his calls. I let it ring, packed my things, and headed to my room at a different hotel across town in Eagle, Idaho. The new hotel room felt safer, 20 miles from Daniel and his desperate attempts to reach me through the motel's front desk. I had just finished organizing my new office supplies when Lisa Wong's investigative report began playing on the mounted television. Her serious expression filled the screen as she stood outside Carter Construction's headquarters, the building looking abandoned despite the middle of the business day. Tonight, we investigate the sudden collapse of one of the region's most trusted construction companies, following federal raids and multiple arrests, Lisa announced. Behind her, workers were removing the bronze letters spelling Carter from the building's facade, each letter dropping into a truck bed with a hollow clang. My phone vibrated with a text from Detective Torres. "Turn to Channel 5 instead. You'll want to see this live." I switched channels to find breaking news coverage. Federal agents were escorting Daniel from the Highway 55 motel in handcuffs, his head down, his expensive suit replaced by the rumpled clothes he'd been wearing for days. The timestamp showed 6:47 p.m., exactly 3 weeks since my birthday ambush. The reporter's voice carried over the footage. Daniel Carter, founder of Carter Construction, arrested on charges of tax evasion, fraud, and conspiracy. The scene shifted to Ethan's law firm in downtown Boise. Through the glass doors, agents could be seen carrying boxes, while Ethan stood frozen at the reception desk, his colleagues backing away as if his legal troubles might be contagious. His arrest happened in full view of the senior partners, who had once praised his ruthless efficiency. They led him out through the main entrance, ensuring everyone saw the Golden Boy's public downfall. Emma's arrest was quieter, but no less complete. The gallery she had loved so much was wrapped in yellow tape. The windows she had spent weeks arranging now blocked by federal seizure notices. Agents found her sitting in the back office, surrounded by pieces she could no longer sell from a business that no longer existed. The reporter noted she went quietly, seemingly in shock. Rachel Carter's arrest provided the evening's dramatic climax. News helicopters circled her penthouse as agents attempted entry. She could be heard screaming about her rights, about conspiracy, about being set up. The footage showed her being dragged out, still in designer heels and a silk robe, her perfectly styled hair finally disheveled. The reporter mentioned additional charges being prepared related to 2 previous husbands' deaths. Torres called as the coverage continued. "Can you come to the station tomorrow morning? There are some things you need to know about what we found." The next morning, Torres's office felt different. The exhaustion in her eyes had been replaced by grim satisfaction. She spread files across her desk, each one labeled with names I recognized. "The text messages we recovered are damning. Rachel and Daniel discussed your removal extensively. The birthday ambush was supposed to destabilize you, make you vulnerable. Rachel had sourced digitalis from a contact in Mexico. The plan was to wait 3 months, then invite you for a reconciliation dinner." My stomach turned, but Torres continued. "Here's the ironic part. Rachel was simultaneously planning Daniel's death for approximately 8 months later. She'd already drafted documents transferring his assets to her name. Your husband thought he was the predator, but he was always her prey. She showed me a message from Rachel to an unknown number. D is easier to manage than expected. Once S is handled, we'll need 6 to 8 months before his heart attack. The construction contracts alone are worth $8 million. Your walking away disrupted everything, Torres explained. Without you to blame for the company's collapse, Rachel couldn't position herself as Daniel's savior. When the investigation started, she panicked, moved too fast, made mistakes. Your silence saved your life, and probably his too. I returned to Evans Construction's offices to find my permanent workspace ready. The corner office Patricia had promised overlooked the entire construction district. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched a foreclosure notice being posted on the house at 456 Pine Lane, Meridian, Idaho, that I had designed with such hope decades ago. The workers were gentle with it, as if understanding the weight of what they were posting. Throughout the day, former Carter Construction employees stopped by to thank me for hiring them at Evans. Miguel had brought his entire warehouse team. The Wilson project foreman had convinced his best crews to make the switch. Even the receptionist, Sophia, who'd worked at Carter for 15 years, now sat at Evans's front desk. "You gave us dignity in this transition," Sophia said, tears in her eyes. "You could have left us all to sink with them, but you didn't." The mail arrived at 3 p.m., with 3 letters forwarded from the hotel. Ethan's handwriting on the first envelope was shaky, the confident legal script replaced by desperate scrawls. His note was brief. "Mom, I need money for the commissary. They're threatening to take my bar license. I know I have no right to ask, but I don't know who else to turn to. The other inmates found out I'm a lawyer. It's not safe here." Emma's letter ran 3 pages, her artistic handwriting cramped and tear-stained. "I never learned anything real, Mom. You tried to teach me, but I thought I was above it all. I thought the money would always be there. I can't even make coffee properly. The halfway house has me washing dishes, and I don't even know how to do that right. I'm 25 and starting from 0. Daniel's message came through his public defender, typed on official letterhead. "Mrs. Carter, my client maintains that Rachel Carter manipulated the entire situation. He states he was coerced into the divorce proceedings and was unaware of the criminal elements involved. He wishes to discuss the possibility of character testimony regarding his years as a law-abiding citizen." I created a new folder in my filing cabinet, labeling it "Birthday Gifts" in permanent marker. Each letter went inside, not out of cruelty, but as evidence of consequences. They had given me divorce papers for my 59th birthday. The universe had returned the favor with arrest warrants for theirs. That evening, I stood in my new office as the sun set over Boise. The Carter Construction sign was completely gone now, leaving only ghost letters on the building's facade where decades of weather had left their mark. Tomorrow, demolition would begin on the interior, stripping it bare for new tenants. Patricia joined me at the window, handing me a cup of tea. "Any regrets?" I thought about the question, watching the last light fade from my former life. They taught me something valuable. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's stepping back and letting them destroy themselves while you build something better from their ashes. The local news played on the office television, showing footage of the 4 arrests again. The reporter mentioned that additional charges were being filed daily as more evidence surfaced. The Construction Industry Board had permanently revoked Carter Construction's license. The IRS had seized all assets pending investigation. Rachel Carter was being investigated for 2 additional suspicious deaths in other states. Justice had arrived exactly 3 weeks after my birthday, wearing handcuffs and carrying federal warrants. 6 months had transformed everything except the sunrise. I stood at the window of my new apartment at 789 Cedar Street, Eagle, Idaho, watching the same sun paint the same sky, but everything it illuminated had changed. The coffee in my hand came from a machine I had chosen, brewed exactly how I preferred it without considering anyone else's taste. The mug, a handmade ceramic piece from a local artist, had no history, no memory, no ghost of better times haunting its rim. The apartment itself was smaller than the house, but every square foot belonged entirely to me. The furniture told no stories of compromise. The leather reading chair by the window had caught my eye at an estate sale, and I bought it without asking permission or checking joint accounts. The dining table seated 4 instead of 8, made from reclaimed pine by a craftsman who understood that imperfections could be beautiful. Above it hung photographs from the past 6 months: Miguel and his family at a barbecue, Patricia and me signing contracts, the Wilson Project's completion ceremony, where David Wilson had publicly credited me with saving his development. My phone rang with Linda Harper calling to confirm lunch plans. She had become a regular presence in my new life, our college friendship rekindled by crisis and strengthened by survival. We met weekly now, 2 women who had learned that starting over at 59 was not a consolation prize, but an unexpected gift. The partnership ceremony at Evans Construction was scheduled for that afternoon. Patricia had insisted on making it formal, inviting clients and industry leaders to witness the transition from employee to equal partner. The documents were already signed. I had learned to read every word now. But Patricia understood the value of public recognition. The conference room filled with people who had watched my public humiliation and private rebuilding. David Wilson arrived early, bringing his wife, who pulled me aside to whisper her admiration. 3 other major clients attended, each one having transferred their contracts from Carter to Evans specifically because of my involvement. The construction inspector, who had flagged Ethan's safety violations, shook my hand with genuine respect. Patricia stood at the podium, her voice carrying across the room with practiced authority. 6 months ago, this company gained something invaluable: integrity in human form. Sarah Carter rebuilt herself and our commercial division simultaneously, securing $8 million in new contracts while maintaining a perfect safety record. Today, she becomes my equal partner in Evans Construction, though she has always been my equal in every way that matters. The applause felt different from any recognition I had received before. This was earned entirely by my own efforts, not reflected glory from a husband's success or children's achievements. The champagne tasted sweeter because I had paid for it myself. That evening, a letter arrived at my office. Federal Bureau of Prisons official seal, Daniel's prisoner number in the corner. Inside, a visitation request form with a handwritten note. Please, one conversation before my transfer. There are things you need to know about the children. I held the paper for a long moment, feeling its weight. The man who had orchestrated my disposal was invoking our children to manipulate me one last time. But curiosity won. 3 days later, I sat in a federal detention center's visiting room, watching them bring in someone who looked like Daniel, aged 10 years. His orange jumpsuit hung loose on a frame that had lost 30 pounds. The confident posture had been replaced by a defensive hunch. When he sat across from me, separated by reinforced glass, his hands shook as he picked up the phone. "You look well," he said, his voice hollow through the receiver. I said nothing, waiting. They're struggling, Ethan and Emma. The public defender says Ethan might get 18 months minimum security if he cooperates fully. Emma's in a halfway house, learning job skills. He paused, studying my face for sympathy that wasn't there. They're your children, Sarah. They stopped being my children when they laughed at my pain. His face crumpled slightly. I need money for the commissary and a lawyer, a real one. Rachel's team is trying to pin everything on me, making me the mastermind when she was pulling the strings all along. You made your choices, Daniel. Every signature, every lie, every secret meeting with Rachel. Those were all choices. I loved you once, he said desperately. Doesn't 31 years count for anything? It counted for everything. That's why the betrayal was so complete. I stood to leave. Sarah, please. His voice cracked through the phone. I'm being transferred to a federal prison in Colorado. 5 years minimum. I'll die in there. I hung up the phone and walked away, his muffled shouts following me through the reinforced glass. The desperation in his voice was the same tone I had carried in my chest that morning they ambushed me. Now it was his burden to bear. A week later, another unexpected letter arrived. This one from Olivia, Ethan's ex-wife, whom he had divorced 2 years ago, claiming she lacked ambition. She was struggling, she wrote, trying to restart her life after Ethan had hidden assets during their divorce. She had heard about my new position and wondered if Evans Construction had any entry-level positions. I hired her as an administrative assistant. She arrived that first morning, nervous but determined, grateful for the chance Ethan had never given her. Watching her slowly find her confidence over the following weeks felt like balance being restored to the universe. The news eventually stopped covering the Carter construction scandal. Daniel got 7 years. Rachel got life without parole after they connected her to 4 murders across 3 states. Ethan received 2 years and permanent disbarment. Emma got probation and community service, though the halfway house reported she was finally learning basic life skills. I kept their letters in the folder marked birthday gifts, occasionally reading them to remind myself how far I had traveled from that morning of orchestrated cruelty. They had given me divorce papers and eviction notices, thinking they were ending my story. Instead, they had freed me to write a better one. Standing in my office as another day ended, I watched the Boise city lights begin their nightly show. Somewhere in federal prisons across the country, the people who had tried to erase me were learning what erasure really felt like. Those 42 desperate calls had come too late because karma had already been set in motion the moment they chose cruelty over compassion. My phone sat silent on my desk, no longer a source of dread, but a tool for the business I was building on my own terms. Tomorrow would bring new contracts, new challenges, new opportunities to prove that the best revenge was not destruction, but reconstruction. I had built beauty from their ashes, and it was entirely mine. If this story of calculated revenge had you holding your breath, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Sarah calmly signed every document with a serene smile, knowing she had already set her plan in motion. What was your most satisfying moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more gripping stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.